Hey, it's Ben. Welcome back to Oasis, Nuevas, Fuerzas. It's good to see you again. Today is the second week of Amber Stark's series on how to take care of your missionary. Today, she's going to be talking about why you shouldn't put your missionary on a pedestal, as well as give good practical advice on how to take care of people that you know that are in missions. So stick around. I think you'll like it.
Go ahead and get started. I don't know that I need to introduce myself to any of you all because I think you all know me pretty well. So we can skip that part for today. So the purpose of the series that I'm doing here is to make lay people, Christian lay people, so average person, more aware of Christian life, missionary life, and missionary struggles in order that you can better understand and thus care for your missionaries and pastors. So today's episode is titled Don't Put Your Missionary on a Pedestal. And next episode is titled Put Your Missionary on a Pedestal. So today we're going to talk about why not to put your missionary on a pedestal. So one of the things that missionaries run into is people have a expectation and perception of missionaries as better than others, as somehow super Christians who don't struggle with anything, who can deal with pretty much anything because they are like God-given strength. They're closer to God, somehow different from others, that missionaries are a different breed. I've heard that said, that missionaries are a different breed. And another thing is that missionary children should be perfect. And that's my dad getting on. And I just said that some people think missionary children should be perfect. And my dad can testify that I am not perfect. Right, Dad? You're muted, so. So people have this perception of missionaries. It's very easy to look at them as something different, as somehow more special than other people, simply
But
because
you are more special. You're my daughter.
I am more special. That's just because you're my dad. As somehow more special than other Christians, that we have somehow attained to a higher level in some way in order to be called into missions. This, however, is not true. Spoiler, missionaries are normal people. And big newsflash, missionaries are sinful people. Shocking, I know. Our calling may be different, but that does not mean that we are inherently different from others. I firmly believe that the Lord calls absolutely every believer to ministry. Now, whether that is ministry by working in a 9-to-5 job and ministering to the people around you and the people in the grocery store and the people in your church, or being called to go to a unknown tribe in the middle of Africa and share the gospel for the first time with people. We are still all called to ministry. So we have just a different job. Like I talked about last time, the aspects of a missionary job are very different from a normal 9-to-5 job. But other than that, we are the same. Just like any Christian, spiritual life is something you have to work at. A missionary isn't automatically closer to God than you are. An average person in the church may be way closer to God than a missionary. It is a matter of working out your faith in your life and your heart and spending time with God. And missionary kids, I hate to tell you, but kids are kids. Kids are kids are kids. If you expect your children to be perfect all the time, then you can expect my children to be perfect all the time. But reality, anyone who has children knows they're not perfect. And missionary kids are no different from other kids. We are just raised in a different home, a different environment, but we are still just as flawed as any others. So one thing that a lot of people don't know is that spiritual struggles for missionaries are often actually much stronger and harder than for other people. This is partly because they are committing their lives to a ministry work, and Satan doesn't like that. So Satan will attack pastors and missionaries even more than other Christians because he wants to stop the work. He will also attack non-missionaries and pastors when they are being extremely effective for the Lord. That's when he gets upset. So struggles can be a lot more intense for missionaries. Another aspect of that is that many of them live in countries where Christianity is a very small minority. And sometimes there is a actual spiritual oppression in the whole country. Just an atmosphere of spiritual oppression, often in Muslim, Hindu, and animistic cultures. It's very difficult. I have missionaries who come out of closed countries who tell me that they can actually feel the difference when they cross the border of the country, whether that's driving or flying or walking or driving. They can feel the lift of the pressure that comes on when they leave the country. So that can have a great impact on your spiritual life to just be surrounded by that all the time. So that's something to be aware of. There's also often no one to turn to, no one to talk to. It's very difficult when you are working on planting a church or ministering to the unreached to talk to those unreached about your spiritual struggles. It just doesn't work. So often there's no one like in the place you are that you can connect with unless you connect really well with your teammates, fellow missionaries, which is another issue we'll get to in a minute. Also, it's usually missionaries will not talk to their supporters or their supporting churches about deep struggles because, to be honest, many churches and individuals will get, I guess you could call it gun shy, and will stop supporting or question their calling or request that they come home from the field if they even mention the need for counseling of any kind. People can be very worried about that and think that it means that you can't remain on the field, which it doesn't. So, because they're ministering constantly, it's very difficult to get fed. I find that difficulty myself. We're constantly giving out and not getting in. Any getting in has to be from our own effort. We have to seek out people, seek out places, seek out, online sermons or books to try and get fed. And sometimes that's a struggle in itself, to have the energy to find something and the time, because you are just overwhelmed with all the needs surrounding you, that it feels more important to care for others' needs than your own. And we at Life Impact are often trying to encourage people. It's like they say in the airplane, you have to put your own mask on first before you care for the person next to you. Otherwise, you're going to pass out and then both of you are gone. So it's hard to think like that. It's like when you have a little child, your first reaction would be to save the child first. But in reality, you won't have time to put theirs on and yours on unless you put yours on first. So it's just an aspect of missionary care that we all try and work on with our missionaries and ourselves. I'm preaching to myself here. So, and in front of of people you're ministering to, you often need to or want to keep on a certain face that you are trusting the Lord, you are good spiritually, you are doing well. Now, that's not always the right choice to make. I'm not saying that it is, but I'm saying that it's often the choice that as missionaries we make. And we also do that, put that face on in front of supporters and churches. I'm sure you all receive lots of missionary prayer letters. I would say a missionary prayer letter is like an iceberg. It's 10%. It's the visible top. That is all you are seeing and hearing. There is 90% under the water that you don't know that's going on. There are things they might not be able to tell you because of security issues, especially those in closed countries. They can't say a lot of things, or they may have to protect the identity of people they're ministering to, so they may not be able to share that. But also they won't share their spiritual struggles because it's a rather impersonal letter. Your prayer letter, it goes out to 100, 200, 300 people. And would you feel comfortable sharing your struggles with 300 people that you cannot even pick out of the lineup? So just understand that there may be a lot more going on than what they will tell you in their prayer letter. And if you want to know more, then you need to talk to them and create an open relationship. For most people who receive the letters, you are a name, and you have never gotten to know them personally. Now, I know that's not true with most of you guys. With me, you know me personally. So when you read it, you know me personally. And if I got an email from you, I would respond in a very open manner because I know you well. But think first before you send an email about how well that missionary knows you. And if they don't know you well, then start the ball rolling. Start getting to know them and open your life to them so that they feel free to then open their lives to you and know that you will not be judging them or condemning them for whatever they are going through. Some other struggles that missionaries go through are just the same as what you would go through. Relationships with your family. You don't always get along with each other. We know that. Relationships within the church, with supporters back home, with the people you're ministering to. Quite frankly, some missionaries do not like the culture they're living in. It's not their favorite. But if they told you that, you'd be like, what? Why are you there? But God has called them there. And so they continue to work and they focus on their work, and that's fine. Team problems are a huge issue in missions. If you work in a 9-to-5 job and you don't get along with your coworkers, you may be able to transfer to another office, or you can get another job. When you are the only American, Canadian, or British families living in a city thousands of miles away from home, you have to work together, even when you don't like each other. And it can be a very big problem. It's one of the highest reasons for missionary attrition. Attrition meaning coming home from the field, is struggles between coworkers. It's kind of hard to get away from people when you're working together in a situation like that. It can be very traumatic. There can be a lot of personality differences. And sometimes you can work past those and sometimes you can't. And it's very hard to just change missions. When you are called to a specific ministry, you don't just want to get up and leave because you don't get along with the Smiths who are also doing the same ministry. So you can pray for your missionaries in that, because that's a very common struggle and something we hear a lot about and we pray a lot about. So another things that missionaries can deal with, I know this is going to shock you, but sin is a constant struggle. So there are problems, missionaries just as much as other people struggle with sin. They struggle with things like addiction or anxiety, or there's porn has been a problem among some missionaries. There are so many things that can come up, and part of that is because of the lack of being fed and being in a community of believers. Missionaries are often isolated from other believers, and so it can be even harder for them in sin struggles. And there's other issues like medical issues, personality disorders, depression, anxiety, burnout, physical illnesses. Malaria is a very common problem among missionaries because it's one of these things that comes up constantly. You can just keep getting it. For a lot of people, dengue fever, all these things can be really difficult for missionaries. So we may think that our missionaries are capable of being supermen and women and just, well, why can't you do another missions outreach next week? I mean, it's been 7 days. Aren't you rested up by now? It's just keeping that perception alive, just being aware of the additional issues that they may have. And depending on the country they're in, things may take a lot longer and be a lot harder. Just going to a grocery store can take half the day or a whole day, depending on where you are. So time issues are different for missionaries. So just being aware of that. Um, So just some stories I have from missionaries, because I know everybody loves stories. Perceptions of being more spiritual than others. Single missionary lady, friend of mine, went to a funeral of a distant relative, and she was asked to give the closing prayer because she was a missionary, even though she didn't know him. And there were several pastors there and older people who would probably have been much better to give a closing prayer. But because she was the missionary, she was expected to do it. It's true at church gatherings. We are often expected to pray before the potluck, which, it's not a big deal. But just to remember that, we're not any more spiritual than you are. Our prayer is not getting to God any faster than yours. We all travel at the speed of love. So, I'll just share this. One of my missionary friends, she said, in our usual routine, we sat down, checked our email, and started to reply to messages until we came to one email. That email was a full page of questions and concerns related to the ministry that we were in. The one that the supporters let us know they didn't think we were doing enough to warrant their monthly support. How do we answer that? Was a question we sat and mulled over and prayed over. It took time to respond to that email. It took reading over it several times to make sure we were communicating and not being judgmental or sarcastic in our response. Did they really think that we only did the few things we mentioned in our last prayer letter? If they only knew, if they only spent a day, a week, or even a month living in our shoes, doing what we do on a daily basis, we felt the unrealistic expectations in a different way. It was a way that made us question and doubt ourselves and what we do and how we live. So this is just an example of how unrealistic expectations can really hinder your missionaries' works, and just to have that understanding. So understanding that counseling is a normal part of life also. Um, I have a missionary was telling me she had friends who needed marital counseling. They could not approach their home church and they could not go home for counseling. They had to find a neutral in-between place because otherwise the church would have sent them home. But counseling is not a bad thing. Counseling is a wonderful thing, and it is very needed often. And the need for counseling does not signal the need for leaving the ministry. The need and the acceptance of counseling is often a sign that they are strong enough to stay in the ministry because they understand their own weaknesses and strengths, and they're willing to deal with them in order to continue their ministry. So be open and willing to listen to missionaries who want to talk to you. As I said, open up your own life so that they don't feel sort of a one-sided conversation. They send you a prayer letter every month, but they have no idea what's going on in your life. Then you ask them to share something very personal. It's going to be very difficult for them. But if you are open and honest with your life and your struggles and difficulties with them, they will be more open to responding to you. Going with that expectations thing, don't expect them to solve your problems either. So when you are talking to them about your struggles, don't expect them, because they're missionaries, they should have all the answers and be able to help me out of this trouble. They may be able to, but I think you need to put your expectations a little closer to home. Someone who is near you, who your pastor or counselor nearby, unless they offer, and that's their choice then. So. I have to look at my notes to make sure I'm covering everything. Okay, so if you see or notice something in your missionaries' letters or emails that it sounds like they're not doing as well, stop. First thing, pray. Second thing, ask them. If you start to notice that their emails seem a little less positive or less whatever, something seems to be changing, don't start talking about church about rumors. Oh, it looks like Amber's not doing quite so great over there. I saw her email. She didn't use nearly as many exclamation marks as she usually does. I'm a little worried about her. I think she might be depressed. Don't go there, okay? Go back to the missionary. Write me an email and say, hey, Amber, have you gotten tired of the exclamation mark, or is something going on? You know, what's going on? Is there anything wrong? I've been praying for you. Is there something specific I can be praying for? If you have a resource for them, if they say, well, honestly, our marriage is really struggling. If you've read a really good book, send it to them. If you know a really good marriage counselor, put them in contact with them. If you feel that you could be advice, offer. Say, you know, we've helped others with marriage struggles. We'd love to help you. If you want to, let us know and we'll set something up. So don't spread the rumors. Go straight to the missionary and offer to help. Don't say, hey, you seem depressed. You need to leave the mission field. That's the usual response we get if you mention being depressed or tired or stressed. Are you sure you should still be there? If you get stressed in your day-to-day job, does your boss come to you and ask you, you seem to be very stressed. Do you want to quit? So just be aware that missionaries are usually called to their jobs for the long term, and they want to stay. They will do what they can to stay.